You guys, this is going to be a fun night. I really like this topic. Everyone loves this topic. So next week is the last of Unit 1. 10 weeks is a long time. So after next week, I think we're going to do a break. TPUSA Faith has been talking to me about doing a like a video apologetics thing, but it's just a few weeks. So I'm gonna. No, it would be Frank Turek, the guy who wrote the book I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
I know that.
Really fun guy. So I'm gonna be in talks with them. They want to have a meeting about it. I'm not sure why, but I'll let you guys know about that.
So it'll be on Wednesday or something?
It will be on Wednesdays, just yeah. And then so we might take a break for that, or we might take some weeks off. But I'll know for sure by next week, and I'll let you guys know. But then the next unit, Unit 2, is actually theology, but not 100% explicitly Christian theology. We're going to talk about theology in the broad sense of the term. Why people think that there's a God in the first place. Is there any evidence that there's a God? Which God are we talking about? What are the characteristics of this God? Where do we get the information about this God? Things like that. So it's going to be very broad, but it's going to be things that aren't necessarily covered in sermons, but are very important to the faith. Does that make sense? And there'll be 10 units of that as well. So I will let you know. But for today, we are going to discuss fallacies. Raise your hand if you've heard of logical fallacies. Oh, good. All right, we are live. So let me pray for us, and then we'll get started. Oh, dear. See? Told you I'm clumsy. All right, here we go. Father God, thank you for this night. Thank you for our church. I pray, God, that you would help us to think well, to do well with everything that you've given us, including our minds. And God, that we can identify parts of our thinking that are incorrect, even parts that are incorrect about you, and that we can set our minds straight. Lord, we know that those who know you have to know you in the heart, but we have to know you in the mind before we can know you in the heart. So help our minds grasp who you are and think realistically about you. It's in Jesus' name, amen. Okie dokie. So as we start, just a quick thing about logic. As you guys know, logic is the mechanism, it's the process that we have to get to human knowledge, right? So everything that you think about, you're using logic. You're either using good logic or bad logic. But good logic is the tool that we use for all of our thinking. Therefore, it's really, really important that we learn how to do it well. But that does not always happen. With all arguments, a conclusion is presented, right? Usually you have, here's what someone wants you to believe. And for it to be an argument, they have to have evidence or reasons to get you to the conclusion of what they want you to believe. Correct? You guys follow? You can take that argument and break it down, hopefully, into standard form and come up with the premises and the conclusion. But what people generally want you to believe is the conclusion. The premises are supposed to be things you already believe or easily can convince you of, right? So, again, the most famous syllogism, Socrates is mortal, or Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. Or you could say, Socrates is a man, all men die, therefore Socrates will die. I mean, you could do this, A equals B, you can do this in letter format, but we're doing it in arguments. In that, what are they trying to get you to believe? Socrates is mortal, or Socrates will die. And then the evidence is, or the premises, are things that we all agree on. He is a man, and then all men die. So anyways, moving forward. A fallacy is when the reasoning to come to the conclusion is faulty, but somehow, or for some reason, still convincing. So there's a fault there. It's not true. Something's wrong with it, but for some reason in our mind, we tend to bypass it, or we think that it's correct, but it's not. And these are huge. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say that in arguments and hearing people talk, I hear more fallacies than I hear logic. more good reasons. So in other words, there's more either sometimes it's even manipulation. Sometimes there's more manipulation in arguing than there actually is factual discussion, which is a huge problem. And if you guys are Christians, you know that we are supposed to be truthful and we're supposed to be straightforward, and using fallacies is not appropriate. Now, sometimes we do it and we don't know it. So if we can out them, then we will. What's up? So let's start with an argument here from 1400. Are you ready? The earth is flat and the sun revolves around it. All the experts agree. Who can identify the conclusion? What are they trying to get you to believe? The earth is flat and the sun revolves around it. What is their evidence for this? The experts say so. The experts say so. Now, if you're going to break this down into standard form, premise 1 would be all the experts say that the earth is flat and the sun revolves around it. Now, there is also an implied premise. Implied means that it's not directly stated. But we all think this. What do we think about the experts? All experts, if it's all of them, they can't be wrong, right? Because all the experts say this. So that's an implied premise. So premise 1, all the experts say that the earth is flat and the sun revolves around it. Premise 2, all the experts cannot be wrong, even though that's implied, right? And then C, the earth is flat and the sun revolves around it. That's what they want you to believe. Now, we know that this conclusion is not true, because we live in the 21st century. Well, some of us anyways. But which premise is faulty? The first premise is true. If at this point, if all the experts actually say it, at that point a lot of people believed it, we can assume that that's true. But the implied premise is a fallacy. All the experts cannot be wrong. Can experts be wrong?
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, I have learned to, really question experts in my day of everything, including the Bible. Just because you're an expert doesn't necessarily mean that you have proven something or you have the actual evidence or that you're correct all the time. So just because experts believe something doesn't make it true. This is called an appeal to authority fallacy. It may be convincing that an authority believes your conclusion, but authorities can be wrong. Obviously, they were wrong about the earth being flat. Now, authorities should have reasons for believing things. What are their reasons? So an appeal to authority means you're just kicking the can down the road. So whenever I try to argue with somebody and I say, well, this authority believes it or that authority says it, that's not a reason. That might convince somebody, but you still don't know why it's true. Maybe the authority knows why. And maybe you have to go and ask, the authority, what are your reasons to get the explanation? In other words, you don't just blindly trust things. Or you can blindly trust things if you guys want. And it can convince you, but it doesn't prove anything. Does this make sense, everybody? So, if you think about, what's the guy's name? Galileo, the guy who famously, he wasn't the first person to argue this, but he famously argued that the earth is, spherical, and that the sun, that the earth revolves around the sun. He didn't just say, oh, the Greeks believed it before me or something. He actually had reasons and evidence. And you could actually go, and he had like 7 to 10 points of evidence that were very convincing. Having to do with you could see the Venus has modes like the moon, which indicates that it's, circling the sun. It can only do that if it's circling the sun. Also, Jupiter had moons that circle it, so you know that not everything is, technology was increasing. They could see things, so you know that not everything circles the earth if moons circle Jupiter, and there's a lot of moons. So he had a bunch of reasons. The point is that to prove something, you have to get to the reasons, not to the authority of the person. Although authorities can be convincing. You guys follow? Okay. So, fallacies are still fallacies even when the conclusion is true. even when the conclusion is true. Let's look at this argument from 1900 instead of 1400. The earth is spherical and revolves around the sun. All the experts agree. Is that true? I believe it's true. I think there's a lot of evidence that the earth revolves around the sun. But me saying all the experts agree doesn't prove it. You guys follow? It merely pushes the evidence down the road. That doesn't mean that authorities can't argue it, and it doesn't mean that you can't cite authorities. It just means that you haven't produced any true evidence to back up your argument. You might have produced evidence to convince somebody, but it doesn't prove it. You guys follow? Okay. This is important. I remember, I don't want to get too political, but I remember during the Obama administration, I would hear a lot of arguments against Obama that were really ridiculous, you know. And even during the debates, I remember with him and McCain, there was a lady who was like, we can't trust Obama, he's an Arab. I think what she meant to say was that he's a Muslim. This really messed up McCain's campaign because he had to interject against his own, you know, voter. She wasn't thinking right, and be like, you know what? Let's not go there. That's not true. He's a nice guy, you know. Which, I mean, if that's why people aren't voting for someone, that not only are they wrong, it's just dumb. You know, oh, he's an Arab. You know, and again, what she meant was that he's a Muslim. But just because someone's a Muslim doesn't mean they're going to be a bad leader. It doesn't. You know, Muslims can be great leaders, particularly of Muslim countries. Anyways. So now you could argue that Muslims make bad leaders, but that's fine. You have to present the evidence, and then you have to present the evidence that Obama was actually a Muslim, which there probably isn't any, right? Not that I know, I don't really care. So, and I would sit here and hear these arguments and think to myself, guys, there are really great reasons that Obama is going to be a terrible leader, and he was a terrible leader, and there's a lot of great reasons for that. But him being Muslim just wasn't one of them, right? He didn't do anything Islamic that besides funding Iran, that was a big problem. So anyways, those were bad arguments, but I think the conclusion was true. You know what I'm saying? So just because you agree with someone, you know, doesn't mean that that you should support the argument's reasons. I hear this all the time, even with Christian apologetics. Even Christian apologetics they'll say things I agree with, guys, but their evidence will be bad or fallacious, or fallacies, as they say. So I'll be like, I agree with you, I just don't think that's a reason to believe what you're saying, you know? And I want Christians to have pure arguments. You guys follow? Okay. So, in recent history, have you heard of an appeal to authority fallacy? I mean, you only have to turn on the TV for like 30 seconds, or go to any website to hear a news article for 30 seconds, and you're going to hear an appeal to authority fallacy. Anybody caught any?
Gender issues?
Yeah, somebody said that, some authority said that gender and sex are different. It doesn't mean anything. Think about it. Where have you seen an appeal to authority fallacy recently? Can you guys think of any? Appeal to authority. Someone's not giving you evidence that their opinion is right or that their point is right. They're just saying so-and-so believes it or the authorities believe it.
All the climate change stuff. How supportive these are.
Okay, climate change, right. So if someone says, all the scientists agree that there's climate change, it's like, okay, that's an appeal to authority. Now, they do have mechanisms that they say are happening, but you would have to prove that they take place. Does that make sense? Like, I'm sure that there's good reasons. Let's hear the reasons. The authorities, we don't trust. And I could name some authorities that would disagree. So it's neither here nor there. So in other words, don't care if an authority says it. What is the reasoning behind it? Yeah, climate change is a big one. You hear that a lot. All sorts of them, guys. Almost everything that you hear in the news is, you know, the economists say that this inflation is just transitory.
Well, but then you have the CEO of Walmart saying, get ready, buckle up, here we go, it's gonna get rough.
Yeah, so-and-so says it's gonna get rough. Well, why is it gonna get rough? How is it gonna rough? How do you know, and what are the indicators? Let's talk about that. Like, school me on it, teach me. Don't just tell me the authority. I mean, anyway, you know, anyways. So, That's the point. You guys understand how this is a fallacy? You guys get it? Okay, let's move on to the next one. So there's actually a lot of fallacies. We don't have time to cover them all. In fact, we probably couldn't cover them all if we spent a week on this. There's almost an unlimited amount of fallacies. Some of them are pretty heinous. Let's look at the next one, the most popular. I'm just going to give you guys like 6 of them and let you know that they exist. And if you guys want to look some more up, I'll tell you how to do that later. Next one, the next big fallacy is called an ad hominem fallacy. Man, we get some weird comments from people online. Okay, ad hominem is Latin for to the person. This is one of the most common fallacies. In this fallacy, one attacks the speaker directly instead of their argument. This is in hopes that if the speaker is discredited, either morally, intellectually, or by collective association, others will not consider their points. This is not only a fallacy, but a very common rhetorical strategy. And if you can destroy someone's ethos or the credibility of the speaker, you can convince people to disregard their argument. So, I'm going to give you guys a proposition here. Here's what I would like to argue. This might be very unpopular, but I don't care. I believe this is true. When someone makes an argument, you have to take the argument based on the merits of the argument, not the merits of the person. I'm not saying that if you've dealt with someone who's manipulated you before, that you should let your guard down. But what I'm saying is, if someone is presenting an argument, you can analyze that argument. It could be true or false. It doesn't matter who it comes from. Ideas are transferable between people. You could have a really bad person say something true. Hitler could come inside the building and be like, guys, it just rained. And be like, oh, Hitler! Don't believe him, he's Hitler. It's like, he's a mass murderer, a psychopath, World War II, right? Now, that's true, he might be a bad person, but he might have said something true. We should go outside and look for evidence, and I happen to know it did rain earlier, because I was outside looking at it. So, it doesn't matter necessarily who the person comes from, but the argument matters. I don't want to say this, but I feel like it's the same way with art. Like, sometimes there's some really heinous people, but they made just a great song. Man, have you guys ever listened to like Iron Maiden, Hallowed Be Thy Name? It's like the greatest metal song of all time. They're not Christians, but I will jam that. Don't tell anyone, I'm a pastor. Anyways, art's based on the merit of the art. Is it good art or is it bad art? If I started judging all art by the people who made the art, I wouldn't look at any art or listen to any songs, because generally people are crappy. No offense. People make a lot of issues. You could argue something glorifies God or not. That's a good question. Anyways, so my point is this: the argument, we have to deal with the actual argument, no matter what. It doesn't matter who it comes from. So, ad hominem is when you attack the person instead of the argument that they're making. And this is incredibly common, but it's the merit of the argument that we have to deal with, not the character of the speaker. So here's a Margaret Thatcher quote. If you guys don't know who Margaret Thatcher is, I'm pretty sure she's dead, but she's like my 1980s, crush, even though she was like 70. What's that?
Oh my gosh, I know who she was.
She was like the British counterpart to Ronald Reagan. Oh, she was awesome, man. She's the Iron Lady. Woo! It's my girl right there. Anyways, so Thatcher, she said this: I always cheer up immensely if an attack is particularly wounding, because I think, well, if they attack one personally, it means they have not a single political argument left. So why are you attacking me? Why don't we talk about the issue at hand? And they call her the Iron Woman because, this is like in the 80s, so they're like, oh, woman in politics, and they try to tear her down for being a woman. She was actually incredibly well-spoken. And, she was a politician, though. She did good and bad. Anyways, very good thinker, though. So, the reason that people do ad hominem is because sometimes they don't want to deal with the argument. They want to deal with the person. So, let's give you a contemporary example right now. Elon and his Nazi salute. Which, you guys see it?
Yes.
Elon's an idiot. So it looked really bad.
Is that what it was?
Was that one of the bumper stickers?
It looked like
bumper
it was
It looked really bad. You know, I'm not going to do it, but you could argue it's a Roman thing. He said, "My heart goes out to you," and he appeared to do a Nazi salute. And then, the news, 1 second of it. And I feel like Trump, on his first term, fell into a lot of traps like this, where he just made blunders that he thought everybody was gonna take him at face value. He didn't realize quite how manipulative people were. So as soon as they catch on to something like that, it's almost impossible to stop. Joe Rogan, in his podcast just before the election, was talking about how he lost all respect for Obama because Obama came out and touted this lie that Trump said that neo-Nazis were very fine people. But, Rogan, who for some reason is a little more innocent than like most guys for whatever reason, he watched the speech and knows that Trump didn't say that. He's like, I don't at all mean the neo-Nazis. They need to be condemned. It's like literally Trump said that. But then they only took the first clip. And he's like, I can't believe Obama lied to everybody. Anyways, I was like, they're politicians. They all do that. Anyways, I thought that was funny. But it was like, he really was like heartbroken that somebody would use an ad hominem attack. But why was Obama using that attack? Because he didn't have an argument against Trump's policies, right? What are the policies that the person wants to put through? Are they good or bad policies? And I don't care what political party you're on, you can have good and bad policies. We have to learn how they work and decipher them, right? So, that being said, an ad hominem is an attack, this is very political, on the character of the person, and if they can get you to dislike the person, you won't regard their arguments or positions. Does that make sense? Most common thing. There's a particular theologian I do not like who recently passed away, Tim Keller. I don't like him because I think that he was a Marxist sympathizer, basically, in a lot of his social dealings. But he was really smart about structuring churches and church growth. So I'll read his books on those things. But I will not read anything about his social ideas of how the church should act at all. I think he was a complete idiot as far as that goes, even though he was super educated. So, again, I don't like him on one thing, but his arguments on the other thing are great. You see, a person necessarily, their arguments are separate than the character of the person. And sometimes some arguments are good and some are bad. We have to deal with the actual argument. So, let's look at, here's an example for you. The leader thinks his tax breaks will benefit the economy, but the president is a Nazi sympathizer, right? You guys see the point?
Yeah.
It's like, well, are the tax breaks going to work or not? Nazi or no? Are the tax breaks going to work is what I want to deal with, because that's the argument at hand. Do you guys follow? That is called an ad hominem, to the man or to the person fallacy. It is super, super common. Any questions on that one? Okay, you guys see how fallacies work? Okay. Let's look at another one. This one is very, very, very common. This is called an appeal to emotion fallacy. It's actually a category because there's so many of these. They use emotion in place of reason to win over the audience. Appeals to emotion can be very manipulative, and untrained thinkers will react to emotion before logic. The emotions exploited are usually offense, sympathy, or fear. While emotions are important, they can have little bearing on the truth of a matter. And oftentimes, the truth of a matter may not make you feel great, but if your goal is truth, your emotions must be controlled or secondary. Let me give you an example. This is one I hear a lot. Even this happened to some people I know. There's this idea that if you don't lie to somebody about their sex, that person is going to be so emotionally hurt that you were not complicit in lying to them, that they're going to harm themselves and kill themselves. Have you heard this? And so a parent will have a gender confused child, and they'll go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, you need to have some radical surgery on this child cut off their healthy parts to help them identify more with the other gender. It's like, why? Because if you don't, they may kill themselves. Well, now, if you have parents without a strong logic, man, what are they going to do? I just saw a video today of a person crying online, like, why did no one stop me when I was a child? You know what I mean? It was really bad. There's a lot of these cases. So, if a doctor ever said that to me, God forbid, man, would I tear them up. It's like, ultimately you don't want your child to harm themselves, but that's a manipulation tactic. I tell my students when I was a high school teacher, if you're ever in a relationship with someone and say, if you try to leave this relationship or don't do this, I'm going to hurt myself, that is a manipulation tactic. It is incredibly wicked, and you need to get out of that relationship. If they harm themselves, that's on them. And it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them being a wicked person. So get out. I tell it to when they're little, they're like little 11th graders, like, who would say something like that? And I'm like, trust me. It might come down the pike. I'm just telling you in case, so you know. And you know what? Sometimes the parents would think I was a little edgy, but I would much rather someone identify when they're being manipulated while they're, get that in them young so that they'll be spared all that drama in life, right? But that's an appeal to emotion. Someone's trying to manipulate you by controlling your emotions. One of the most common ones is, the children. You bring children into it. People are sympathetic to children. I am. They want to put men who think they're women in girl sports. I have two ways I could argue that. One is, think of my daughters. Think of my poor daughters who are going to get beat down by a man. It's kind of true, right? Or I could be like, they're men. And if you put a man in women's sports, that defeats the purpose of sports, which is competition. Because of an unfair advantage due to body mass, on average. It's very, very simple mathematical, biological truth. Doesn't really matter what else you argue. On the other hand, I am really upset that you're jacking with my kids' futures. So there's a little more emotional fortitude, but I don't need to go to the emotions of it. It just logically doesn't make any sense. And it's a violation of my religion to lie to somebody. It's a violation of my logical truth too, so I won't call you a gender that you're not. And you cannot play on my girls' sports team if you're a boy. Simple. That's all there is to it. The answer is no. And no. And if we all acted like that, we wouldn't have this problem, right? So, very logical. Anyways, this video is going to be, we're going to get sued here in a minute. You are in California. So, an appeal to emotion fallacy is a category. They use emotion in place of reason to win over the audience. Appeals to emotion can be very manipulative, as the untrained thinkers will react to emotion before logic, right? Emotions are exploited. They're exploited. You got to control your emotions. Now, there's this really cool proverb. I love this proverb. Proverb 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. What does that mean? Can you extrapolate the principle that the wise, I assume Solomon, is trying to explain to us?
I would rather have a friend tell me the truth, even if it hurt, as opposed to a liar tell me everything's great and it fills me in.
Excellent. I heard another way of saying this. That's when someone loves themselves, they tell you what you want to hear. When someone loves you, they tell you what you need to hear. You need to hear. Something like that. So, what they're getting at is, if somebody is only saying things that appeal to your emotions, they very well may be an enemy. They're trying to get on your good side. They're trying to smooth talk you. They're trying to deceive you somehow or get something out of you. But if you have somebody who calls you out on something, even though it hurts your feelings, that there is a true friend, right? Because they know that the truth is more valuable than your emotional feeling at the time. And in the end, it's going to be better than, how many times, raise your hand if you're confronted by somebody when you're jacking up, And aren't you glad that person said something? Even though you were trying to deny it, and no, no. I'm perfect. Yeah, scratch my head on that one. What are you going to do? Okay, and there it is right there in Proverbs, right? We can't use emotions to control people, but speaking the truth in love is important. Okay, any questions on an appeal to emotion? Oh man, these are big, guys. These are big. How dare you? As soon as someone says, how dare you, appeal to emotion. I just be like, I dare. I'm offended. It's okay, you can be offended. People get offended, and it's an okay position to have. You know, I'm going to start taking like a box of offended cookies. Be like, here, have an offense cookie. Are you offended? Eat a Snickers. All right. Hey, people offend me all the time. They do. No, seriously. I'm very sensitive. People offend me. And I sit here and I think to myself, that person does not mean to offend me. And if they do mean to offend me, I probably don't care. You know, it's like, whatever. You know, some things are offensive to me. It's really hard to get me mad. I mean, it really is. Just because I'm like, well, I know this person just is bad at talking, you know, or I'm bad at listening. One of the two. Anyways, it's okay. It's okay. People act like it's the worst thing in the world. Anyways, all right. Next one. This one is unusual. You don't see it on a lot of lists of logical fallacies because it's mainly just used as manipulation. But I hear it a lot these days. And so I want you guys to know what this is. It's called a Kafka trap. A Kafka trap is a fallacy whose name is derived from the novel The Trial by Franz Kafka. It takes place when an accuser uses the denial of the accused as evidence of guilt. These nasty types of argument manipulation are becoming more and more common. So have you guys seen Monty Python?
Yeah.
And the Holy Grail?
Yeah.
He says, denying you're a witch is proof that you are a witch, for witches always deny being witches. And then, what is it? They drowned her, and if she floats, she was a witch, but if she dies, she wasn't, or something. It's like either way, she's going to die. Oh, it's ridiculous. But if you use someone's denial as evidence against them, it's manipulation. It's not logical. So, and sometimes we get these in recovery. You know, it's like, well, denial is evidence that you have a problem. No, because if I really don't have a problem and I still deny it, then I just don't. You know what I mean? Like, you know, there's I don't have any addiction. There's wine bottles, you know, at my house. I hate wine particularly, but you know, it's like if my wife had a problem, I'd notice. You know, it's like, no, she's okay. I don't prefer it, but anyways, to me, it tastes like rotted grapes. I just don't. But whatever. It's not a problem. So she says it. She's actually telling the truth, right? So the denial of it isn't the evidence that there's an issue. The issue is that there's evidence there's an issue, right? In the same sense, if someone denies something that can't be used as evidence against them, denial is the first step of a rebuttal. If you're in an argument, you disagree, someone's going to give a rebuttal. They're going to do a counter argument. It's just part of it. So here's how this one works. You're a Nazi. I'm not a Nazi. Aha, see? Only Nazis would argue that they're not. Only a Nazi would say that. Have you guys ever seen these? So these happen, so there's actually a book where a Kafka trap is the title. It's called White Fragility. And it argues that white people are so offended at dealing with racism that they get all kerfuffled. You know, and they're so fragile that they, you know, and it's like, so they either admit it or they deny it, which is proof that it's true, right? It's like, you can't have a white person actually be like, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, what's wrong with that? Because it kind of doesn't make sense. Anyways, so, well, there you go. There's a white person denying it, therefore they're guilty of it. It's just a manipulation tactic. I can't believe it made it to the title of a book before anyone called it out, but hey, what are you going to do? I didn't write it. In any case. A denial is the conclusion of a rebuttal. It is an essential part of any counter-argument. It's not evidence of guilt. If there is a false accusation made, there's usually a denial. That's a normal thing. Or, whatever. You gotta have to define terms. Okay. Any questions on the Kafka trap? I hate putting that in there, guys, but it's so common these days. And I've seen literally this happen. It happens at least once a month, or I'll be somewhere and I'll see it. When it happens, we're going to talk about this at the end, but just identify it. It's like, see what you did there? It's called a Kafka trap. People, when you can identify this and call them out, it disarms your opponent. It's like, that's actually a manipulation tactic. You can't use my denial as evidence against me. That's it. So if I don't deny it, then I'm also accepting it, Anyways. All right, let's look at the next one. The next two are a little complicated. You guys ready? Next one, the final two. This one is called an equivocation. An equivocation is a manipulation tactic commonly used by cults and highly manipulative people or groups. It works by using the same word but with an alternate definition in order to sway the audience. It is similar to a pun or double entendre, but used for arguing instead of humor. Manipulative groups, well, before we get into the example, let me give you some off-script examples that I've seen. The whole gay marriage debacle is filled with equivocations, right? Why can't two men just love each other? It's like, I love men. I love my roommates. I love my dad. If I had a brother, I love my Christian friends. I love them. So what's different? We're equivocating love and sex. Ain't the same thing. It's like you can love anyone you want. Go love your same-sex roommate. You're a roommate. Ta-da! Nothing's changed in the world, Now, if you want to have sex with your roommate, who's the same thing, now we have something else but don't call it love, because that's not what's happening. You might very well love that person, sure, in your own mind. But no one has a problem with the love. It's the other stuff that there's an issue with, right? And I really don't care what you do. The question is that equal a marriage? So, if you guys ever want to have a fun study, when the Supreme Court heard the arguments for gay marriage, quote unquote, there was the argument that it's a civil rights issue. You cannot marry the person that you love. This is it's very simple. But if you read the rebuttal to the argument, I think it was Scalia who wrote it. I can't remember. Or Clarence Thomas. They said, nobody has any different rights than anyone else. Everybody is free to be married according to the definition of marriage. There's a man and a woman. Everybody has that same right. Nobody is excluded from marriage. What we're doing is we're changing the definition of marriage. That's all that it was. And that definition is historic, and it has a precedent. And if you change the definition of marriage, it goes all the way back through all of our laws and manipulates all the laws in the past. It is an equivocation, an intentional equivocation. And it's a bypass of actually thinking and having logic. Why do you even, I still don't understand why people want to be married or pretend to be married that are the same sex. It doesn't do anything. It's almost like they want to, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me.
They got insurance from their companies and stuff over there.
Okay, so yeah, there's an argument about having like insurance benefits and stuff like that or whatever. Government benefits. First of all, I don't think there should be any government benefits in the first place. But that's why they have what's called a civil union. Or whatever. Anyways, it gets murky, obviously. We can have arguments about this all day. But that's fine. But I want to argue it. I don't want to be manipulated. You guys understand? So we have to define terms and understand what they mean. So there's an equivocation that I witnessed when I was a kid that first startled me when I noticed this. I was probably 20 years old, and I was talking to some Mormons. And there's these two little Mormon guys in my neighborhood, and they're talking to my neighbor. And me, I'm going to roll up on them because that's my style. I'm like, what's going on? You're in my neighborhood, Mormons. What are you doing? And they're talking to this guy. And this guy was arguing with them, or trying to argue with them. And he stood on his porch, and he said, because he knew a little bit of Mormon theology, and he said, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God. Now, what did he mean by that? What he meant is he knew that Mormons are polytheistic and that they believe that there are many gods and many sons of gods, right? Including Satan is a son of God, like everybody. And he knew that, and so he was trying to get them to state their theology. And the Mormon guys looked at each other and they go, of course we believe that Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God. It says it right here in John 3:16. Why? Do you even know anything about us? And the guy just was like, oh, my bad. I thought that you believe something else. Okay, well, very well. And I'm like, wait a minute. They do believe something different. They're tricking this guy. And they're doing it intentionally. They are trying to cloak underneath the language what they believe because they know that that's what he's offended at. So they're lying and manipulating to him. And they do this, by the way, they're constantly doing this right now. If you guys have any online presence, the Mormons are all over my feed right now. Like, hey, come celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They want to sound exactly like Christians, but they're not going to tell you the weird theology beliefs that they have. They just want to appear to be Christians so that people who have Christian tendencies but don't know jack diddly about Christianity will get suckered into going to their church. That's how they make their converts. They don't make their converts by logical anything. They want to capture people who have an affinity towards Christianity but haven't been invited and are easy targets, basically. And so they cloak themselves. Here's how it works. They have a equivocation with the word begotten. I don't want to get into the Greek because they probably don't use it. But they like to use the King James Bible. I pointed out in this article that cults love using the King James Bible. Now, the King James Bible happens to be an excellent translation, but it's 400 years old, which means that it was written at the time of Shakespeare, what is called early modern English. And English has changed, our words have changed in 400 years. We don't use these, thee or thous anymore and things like that. And even the diction or the particular words that we use have changed. Nobody in the world uses begotten unless they're quoting John 3:16 in the King James Version. It's not a common word in use, so no one really knows what it means, right? Because we don't use it. So modern translations have done away with the word and just use our contemporary words in just contemporary English. But cults love that old King James because there's a lot of words in there that people don't know the definition to, and so they can manipulate it easily. If you don't understand the passage, it's easier for them to insert their meaning. Do you understand? So I'm always weary of groups that insist on using the KJV. Some of them are okay. They just have an interesting affinity towards it, but a lot of them are cults. If you ever see the Hebrew Israelites, have you guys seen these guys? Oh man, they've been camping out up there at Mission Beach, and they're a racist group that thinks that they're Jews. Very interesting. And they'll just cuss you out, man. And they wear these they think that they're wearing like Jewish, old school Jewish purple garb and stuff like this to follow the Jewish law. They just look like defunct superheroes. They're terrible. And they're very ignorant people. They're very racist. If you're white, man, they think that the whiter you are, the more wicked you are. And so they'll just cuss you out. It's kind of like Nation of Islam, what Malcolm X was in. But it's not Islamic, it's Jewish. Anyways, it's complicated. But, man, anytime you hear them talk, they will quote the Bible from the King James, and it almost is never what the verse says. They just don't know the Bible. They know how to manipulate it, though. And they know how to overrun you if you try to argue with them. They're very, very aggressive. They won't let you talk because they know that if you deal with the argument, if you deal with the actual argument, they're going to lose. And I have sat down with them, and it didn't go well. That's not what that means. Do you even know who wrote this book? What's the theme of it? Name the 10 Commandments. They can't do anything. Anyways, so they like to use the King James Version because it's easy to manipulate because people just don't know the words. So I have it written down here. Christians translate the word begotten to mean unique or only. That's why the modern translations say, for God so loved the world, he sent his one and only Son, right? That demonstrates Jesus' special relationship to the Father. Mormons, though, on the other hand, they redefine the word begotten to mean The only spirit child directly and physically born from God into a human body. All the other spirit children came through human birth. So in other words, it's particular and peculiar to their weird, demonic theology. But it's not Christian. But the Mormon definition allows them to use the same passage as Christians without challenge, although the theology is different. In other words, it cloaks them. They simply, in their theology, change the definition of the word, so if they get challenged, it looks seamless. No, of course we believe it, Boom, boom, boom. Anyways, manipulation tactic. Any questions on equivocations? When you face an equivocation, you have to define terms. What do you mean by that? Sometimes a word can have two definitions. That's fine. What did you mean by it this time? There's an example in the Bible. People will say, "You're not a child of God unless you're saved. If you're not a child, if you're not saved, you're a child of Satan." Jesus actually said that in the book of John. It's like you're not from, your father. You're from your father, Satan. It's like, so in one sense that's true. If you're talking about if you've been born into and adopted by God in the family of the King, right? On the other hand, there is this passage in Acts chapter 17 where Paul is arguing on Mars Hill before the Greek pagans, and he says, we are all God's children. We've all been created by God. We're all God's children. So in the word, the idea of being God's child has two different senses. In the sense that you were created by God, you're God's child. You owe yourself to know him. You're from him. In the other sense of, are you actually in God's family? No, you're not, unless you're a Christian. So they're both true, it just depends on what sense you mean it. Does that make sense? So whenever someone says you're a child of God, I would say, well, what do you mean by that? Get me the definition so we can agree and move on. That's how equivocation works. Can you define that for me, what you mean by that? It's totally fine to ask that. You have to come to terms. It's like, if you've been married or you are married, stop yelling. Can you define yelling? Like, what do you mean by yelling? I happen to be a loud person. So it might seem like I'm yelling to you, but to me, I'm just being myself, like whatever. You got to define the terms, right? You got to define them. Otherwise, you risk offense. All right. Sorry, baby, if you're watching. Love you. All right. Last one. This one, guys, is huge and it's important, and I want you to... This is everywhere. I want you to understand the logic here. Everybody say, correlation versus causation. All right, look at our graph right here. As you can see, in July, there was a spike in ice cream sales, as well as shark attacks. The two are correlated. To the untrained mind, somebody might think that they are, one caused the other. Oh man, this is what happens. If you eat ice cream, you're going to get attacked by a shark. Maybe you smell like the ice cream or something, These sharks love the taste of ice cream filled humans. However, but the problem here is that no matter what, you have not explained how one causes the other. So you have not explained the causation. It's a very common fallacy, one of the hardest to learn to identify. It occurs when two events or issues are mistakenly believed to have a cause and effect relationship. Just because the two events are similar or linked or correlated does not mean that one caused the other. It must be proved that one caused the other. So why do you think that ice cream sales and shark attacks are correlated? Why are they connected? Good. If it's hot, you're going to eat ice cream and you're going to go to the beach. You can't get attacked by a shark unless you're in the water. People don't go in the water in the winter, so the attacks go down. Make sense? Yeah. People don't eat ice cream in the winter because it's cold. So, hey, I don't judge you. So, both of these have a cause. The causation hot weather. Really important. In science, guys, my wife does research on vitamin D. She's a scientist, and there's all sorts of stuff that she'll find all these things where it's like obesity is correlated to a lack of vitamin D in your system. And it's like, oh, that means if you're obese, you're not taking in vitamin D. That's not actually what it is. It's actually there's a lot more of you, and so it gets spread out. I mean, they're correlated, but one doesn't cause the other. So you have to see like, well, what's the issue? The issue is actually, something else. So there's correlation and a cause. So you just have to figure out, what they are. The problem is actually overeating, not, necessarily this. So that's a huge thing in science. You have to figure it out, right? It's also huge in logic. People will come to you and say, well, this is a big thing with sociology and racism and poverty. People are always driving arguments like this, and it's like, but that doesn't cause the other. There are some instances, and you can get in a lot of trouble for pointing out these facts, but there are some demographic groups, which I don't even really believe in, that are associated with different things. You've heard like white guys are serial killers. That's a thing. It's like, well, let's define it and look at it. But it doesn't mean that being white makes you a serial killer, right? 40, so don't look at me. Yeah, so, sorry guys, sorry. But it doesn't mean that being white causes it. There's another cause. You just have to figure out what that is. You see what I'm saying? You can do this with all groups across the map. And it leads to a lot of racism because people simply can't understand that the superficial way you look doesn't cause things. Your skin color doesn't cause things. It's stupid. Now, you might have a culture lead you into a wrong issue, but that's the ideas, not your skin color. Get rid of the idea, the problem goes away. Or get better ideas, right? No matter what color you are or anything. There are some physical things, though, and some differences between men and women. But you can obviously see these. Men on average are stronger than women on average, right? We discuss these things. Like, that is an obvious truth. I'm sure there's a study somewhere that's like women are slightly more emotionally oriented and men are slightly more logic oriented. I'm sure that there's some study out there that shows that, and there's probably a reason for that. Women generally have the equipment to raise children, and so they have to have an affinity towards little crazy things. I don't know. And men have to kill animals to eat and live and do hard things, like even perhaps defend the village and kill men. And so you can't, like, I don't want to hurt anybody. You won't live long. You have to eat the animal, so it has to die. Sorry, animal, I love you, but, So maybe there's a little bit more detachment in men for those types of reasons. Anyways.
There's a picture reminding me of the sign on University going into Lisa. It's like, animals are friends, not food.
Then why did God make them out of meat?
Right? I've seen the sign on occasion of thinking.
Where's that
On University, I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's like.
Is it a billboard?
It's before the Crop Center.
Oh, yeah.
at? Right here by my house, and I haven't seen it. I would laugh for
If
days.
you go down College, turn right on University, and start driving to Mesa on the left-hand side. Like across from the Crop Center, right before the Crop Center.
Right before, yeah. By the.
How did I miss it?
The gym that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Animals are friends, not food. Is that what it says?
I know, animals are food.
They can be both.
Yeah.
See,
It's like holding a chicken or something.
that actually is another fallacy I almost put in here called a false dichotomy, where it can either be one or the other. Not true. It could also, an animal could be a delicious friend. If my family was starving, I got to bring it to my dog. He's going to be in the roast. That's all there is to it. All right. This has been a socially rated R logic study, so I apologize to anyone online who's been offended. I even offended myself, so there we go. That's it. So, do you guys understand what a fallacy is? Are we clear on that? Basically, if someone gives you a reason, you should think about that reason and say, does this reason connect to the point? Does it really give evidence to the point of what they're saying? This is huge for you to know when you are being manipulated. If I could push anything to you guys, no matter who, even if it's people that you agree with, do not put up with manipulation. It is a toxic human trait. It is sinful. You are supposed to be straightforward with people. You know, God hates unequal weights. He detests lying lips. You see these scriptures everywhere. It doesn't do favoritism. You know, he wants us to think well. So we shouldn't have to manipulate people. We should be able to discuss directly with people and let them make their own choice on the merits of the argument. If we don't do this, we're going to have a very, very, very rough time in life, and bad things happen. It's extremely important that we learn to identify manipulation. It also drives me crazy when I see people manipulated. Doesn't it bother you? You see people manipulation in manipulative organizations or manipulative relationships, and you're like, how can you not see what's going on here, right? But that is scary. It is scary. False religions. Exactly. And there's a lot of them. So it's key. So we are studying. We're studying philosophy and thinking, so you got to learn how to think well and give good reasons. Let's pray. God, thank you for our meeting tonight. I pray that you will help us to be good thinkers, to think well. Help us think about you well, God. Help us to treat each other with dignity and respect. Help us not to become people who use bad logic or manipulate. And help us to call out those who do. In Jesus' name, amen. Very powerful to be able to name the fallacy if someone's trying to manipulate you and say, here's why I don't believe you. You are using this particular fallacy. If you guys go to any informal logic online class or just look up list of fallacies, you'll find dozens. And you can go through them. It is very entertaining, to say the least. And that is it.
Here next week too?
Yep.